My name is Russell, and for 27 years my office was the sky. Not just any sky, but the thin, unforgiving air above 50,000 feet where the world curves away and the stars don't twinkle. I was the chief test pilot for Aerodyne Innovations, a company I helped build from a garage workshop into a leader in experimental aerospace. I wasn't just an employee, I was part of the machine's soul. The machine in question was the XF-117, codenamed the Etherian. It was less an aircraft and more a prophecy written in carbon fiber and titanium. It was my baby. I was the only person on Earth who had ever flown it. Every bolt, every line of code, every aerodynamic surface, I knew them all intimately. I'd felt them shudder and sing through the control stick, a conversation whispered between man and machine at twice the speed of sound. Then came Chloe. She didn't walk into the company, she descended upon it, a whirlwind of tailored business suits, an MBA from a school that cost more than my first house, and a vocabulary comprised entirely of words like synergy, disruption, and aggressive growth. She was the new director, brought in by a board of investors who no longer saw the beauty in flight, only the numbers on a spreadsheet. Our old CEO, Arthur Vance, a man who had grease under his fingernails and understood the smell of jet fuel, had retired. He'd shaken my hand and told me, "Keep her true, Russ. Don't let the accountants crash her." A promise I intended to keep. The first sign of trouble was the meetings. My flight debriefs, once intense, hour-long sessions with engineers poring over every scrap of data, were replaced by 15-minute PowerPoint summaries for Chloe. She'd tap her pen on the table, her eyes glazed over as I explained the nuances of high-alpha handling or the specific thermal stresses on the composite wings during supersonic ascent. She didn't care about the engineering poetry, she cared about the schedule. The day it all ended started like any other. I was in the hangar, running my hand over the Etherian's fuselage. It was cold to the touch, a sleeping predator. My ground crew chief, a grizzled veteran named Sal, handed me a coffee. He nodded towards the observation deck. "The Queen is holding court," he grumbled. Chloe was up there with a group of men in sharp suits, pointing at my plane like it was a piece of abstract art she'd just acquired. An hour later, I was summoned to her office. It was a sterile white space that smelled of money and air freshener, a stark contrast to the familiar scent of oil and ozone in the hangar. She didn't ask me to sit. She stood behind her massive glass desk, a stark silhouette against the panoramic window. She said, "Russell, we're making a change to the Etherian program. The board feels our progress has been methodical, too methodical." I stood there, my flight suit feeling suddenly loose, suddenly like a costume. Methodical is another word for safe. "Chloe, we're not building a toaster oven. We're pushing the edge of what's possible." A thin, dismissive smile touched her lips. "The new paradigm requires agility. We have a public demonstration flight scheduled for next week, a major event for our investors. We need to show them a more dynamic flight profile." My blood ran cold. A public demo. We're not ready. There are still intermittent data flickers in the fly-by-wire I haven't been able to isolate. It's not a critical risk yet, but it's an unknown. We don't do dynamic with unknowns. She picked up a sleek silver pen and examined it as if it were infinitely more interesting than the man who held the company's billion-dollar prototype in his hands every week. "That's precisely the problem," she said, her voice dropping to a cool, clinical tone. "Your file says you're the best, but your actions say you're cautious. The investors need to see confidence. They need to see a pilot who will push the envelope, not measure it with a ruler." I felt the floor drop out from under me. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're grounded, Russell. Effective immediately." She gestured to a young man who had been standing silently in the corner, a man I hadn't even registered. He had that cocksure swagger of a fighter jock who'd spent more time in a simulator than in a real crisis. He looked like he'd been styled for a recruitment poster. "This is Jax. He comes to us with extensive experience in next-gen fighters. He understands the aggressive profiles we need to showcase. He and his team will be taking over the final preparations for the demo." Jax gave me a curt, dismissive nod. His eyes scanned my flight suit, my weathered face, and I could see the judgment in them. I was a relic, a fossil from an age of caution and slide rules. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it stole the air from my lungs. 27 years. Thousands of hours in the sky, pushing the boundaries, bringing planes and their crews home, when the data said I shouldn't have been able to. All of it erased in 30 seconds by a woman who wouldn't know a control yoke from a coffee cup holder. You'll be reassigned, she continued, the words a dull buzz in my ears. We can find a role for you in simulation oversight or ground-based training, a desk job, a cage. After all I had given, they wanted to put me in a cage and watch from a distance. I finally found my voice. It was quiet, steady. I understand. I turned and walked out, not giving her or the poster boy the satisfaction of seeing me break. I walked past my crew, past Sal, who looked at me with a question in his eyes I couldn't answer. I walked through the hangar, past the Ethereum, my plane, without a backward glance, because looking at it would have broken me. I drove home in a stupor, the world outside my windshield a blurry, meaningless film. When I got home, I didn't go inside. I went to my workshop in the garage, a sanctuary of ordered steel and wood where I built scale models of the aircraft I had flown. It was a place of precision, a place of control. I sat down at my workbench, the scent of wood glue and paint thinner, a strange comfort, and that's when it hit me. The full, crushing weight of it all. It wasn't just the insult, it wasn't just losing my job, it was the Ethereum. They were going to let that swaggering hotshot fly my bird, a man who didn't know her secrets, a man who only read the official reports. What Chloe didn't know, what no one knew, was that the official reports were incomplete. My most important notes, the ones that kept me up at night, weren't in the company's servers. They were in my personal logbook, a thick leather-bound volume that I kept in a locked drawer of my desk at home. It was a habit from the old days, a backup for my own peace of mind. And in that logbook, written in my own precise technical script, were the details of the ghost in the machine, a critical, intermittent software glitch in the fly-by-wire system, a ghost I had only met once, for a terrifying 3 seconds, a glitch that only occurred at a specific razor-thin intersection of altitude and airspeed, 45,000 feet, Mach 1.2, the exact spectacular, high-speed pass I knew, with bone-deep certainty, they would attempt during their demonstration to impress the money men. Chloe hadn't just grounded a pilot, she had grounded the one man who knew how to keep her prized asset from falling out of the sky. And in her arrogance, she had handed me the perfect silent revenge. The silence of my workshop was absolute, broken only by the hum of the small refrigerator where I kept my specialty paints. I wasn't thinking about bourbon, as the old cliché goes. My mind was too sharp, too cold for that kind of solace. I was a pilot, a creature of process and discipline, even in my grief. I sat on the stool, my hands resting on the half-finished model of an F-4 Phantom, its complex wing geometry, a familiar comfort. The raw, unvarnished anger was there, a hot coal in my gut, but on the surface, a chilling clarity was beginning to form. They hadn't just fired a man, they had fired a library. They had dismissed an encyclopedia of knowledge that existed nowhere else on Earth. Knowledge earned not in a classroom, but in the crucible of high G turns and heart-stopping emergencies. My wife, Lena, found me there an hour later. She didn't say a word at first. She just came in, placed a hand on my shoulder, and stood with me in the quiet. Lena wasn't a pilot, she was a history professor, but she understood the nature of obsession, of a life's work. She knew what the Ethereum meant to me. After a long moment, her grip on my shoulder tightened. "Tell me," she said, her voice soft but firm. I told her everything. The meeting, Chloe's condescending smile, the word cautious hanging in the air like an epitaph, the swaggering replacement, Jax. When I finished, I expected sympathy, maybe some righteous anger on my behalf. I got something far better. I got steel. "They're fools, Russ," she said, her voice devoid of any pity. It was a statement of fact, arrogant, spreadsheet-gazing fools. "Did you tell them about the flicker you mentioned last month?" I shook my head. There was nothing to tell, not officially. I only saw it once. 3 seconds of instability at a very specific point in the flight envelope. I couldn't replicate it on the next 3 test flights. To put a single, unverified anomaly in the official log would have been irresponsible. It would have grounded the program for months, chasing a ghost. I was collecting more data, trying to build a pattern. It was all in my personal log. I was being methodical, my own word thrown back in my face. So the only record of this ghost is in your logbook? Here, at home? Lena's eyes, usually so warm and academic, were sharp, analytical. Yes, I said. The telemetry from that flight just showed a brief, anomalous spike in the control surface actuators. The engineers wrote it off as sensor noise, but I felt it. It was a physical event. The stick went dead in my hand for a split second, then came back with a jolt. It felt like the plane had a seizure. This was the part that people like Chloe could never understand. The symbiosis between pilot and machine. A computer can read data, but a pilot can feel intent. I knew the Etherian's moods, its quirks. I knew the difference between a normal vibration and a death rattle. Lena stepped back and crossed her arms, her professor mode kicking in. So let me understand the tactical situation, she said, a slight, grim smile on her face. A new, unqualified leader has taken command. She has dismissed the veteran commander based on a flawed perception of his methods. She is now planning a high-risk public demonstration, and she is utterly ignorant of a critical flaw in her primary weapon system, a flaw that only the dismissed commander knows about. Hearing her frame it like one of her historical military debriefs was jarring, but it also crystallized my own swirling thoughts. That about sums it up, I said, a dry, humorless chuckle escaping my lips for the first time that day, and she continued, pointing a finger at me. This commander has a detailed personal record of this flaw, a record that is his personal property, not the company's. The logbook, I whispered. It was more than just a notebook. It was my life's work in miniature. I stood up, walked over to the old metal filing cabinet in the corner of my workshop, and unlocked the top drawer. I pulled out the logbook. It was a heavy, A4-sized ledger, bound in dark blue leather, the corners worn smooth from years of use. I opened it on my workbench. The pages were filled with my neat, blocky handwriting. Flight dates, times, fuel loads, weather conditions, but interspersed with the dry data were my personal observations. Slight yaw, instability, on transonic approach. Feels like a software lag in the rudder authority, not in the telemetry. Need to watch this. Engine 2 is running 3 degrees hotter than Engine 1, above 40,000 feet. Maintenance says it's within tolerance. I don't like it. It feels labored. And then, there it was, the entry from 5 weeks ago. I ran my finger over the page. Flight XF 11728, altitude 45,000 feet, airspeed Mach 1.2, conditions clear, ISA 5C. My notes were chillingly precise. 14 hours 32 minutes and 15 seconds. Zulu, entering planned high-speed level run at precisely M1.2, experienced momentary severe control degradation. Stick felt disconnected from control surfaces for approx. 3 seconds. Violent, uncommanded roll to the right, approx. 15 degrees. Corrected with manual rudder input. Fly-by-wire system seemed to reboot and re-engage. Telemetry spike on aileron. Actuator bus C, but no corresponding error code logged by the primary flight computer. Engineers suggest sensor interference. I disagree. This was not noise. This was a loss of authority. Felt like a resonance cascade. The airframe felt like it was trying to tear itself apart for a moment. Could not replicate during remainder of flight or subsequent tests. Hypothesis: a specific frequency of aerodynamic vibration at this speed, altitude combination is causing a buffer overflow in the flight control software's predictive dampening algorithm. It's a ghost, but it's a ghost that could kill. Beneath the text was a hand-drawn graph, plotting airspeed against the vibrational frequency I'd felt through the frame. It was a theory, a professional intuition, backed by decades of experience. But it was all I had, and it was everything. This was the moment my resolve hardened. The anger and the grief receded.
replaced by a cold, sharp focus. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not entirely. This was about professional malpractice. Chloe and her team were flying blind, not because the information didn't exist, but because they had chosen to be ignorant. They had declared my experience irrelevant. The word cautious echoed in my head, but now it sounded different. It sounded like professional. It sounded like survivor. My phone buzzed on the workbench. I looked at the screen. It was Ben Carter. Ben was one of the brightest young avionics engineers on the Etherian project. I'd mentored him, taken him under my wing when he was a fresh-faced intern. He was a good kid, smart as a whip, and he understood that not all data came from a sensor. I answered. Ben, Russell, he said, his voice low, urgent. I just heard. I can't believe it. Are you okay? I'm fine, Ben. Just processing. It's insane. He spat.
Chloe held a meeting with the new team. This guy Jax, he's all swagger. He's talking about a flight plan for the demo that pushes the envelope into the red, a high G climb to 45,000, a level off and a supersonic dash right at Mach 1.2, directly over the investor viewing area. I closed my eyes. It was exactly as I'd feared. They weren't just stepping into the trap, they were sprinting towards it with a marching band. What's the mood in engineering? I asked, keeping my voice level. Tense. A few of the older guys are pissed. The younger ones are either scared of Chloe or drinking the Kool-Aid this Jax guy is serving. He's dismissing all our old test data, calling it conservative baseline modeling, he said. And I quote, "It's time to see what this bird can really do when you take the training wheels off." The training wheels. He was talking about me, about my safety protocols, about the meticulous step-by-step process that had kept that billion-dollar prototype in one piece. "Ben," I said, a plan forming, cold and clear. "I need you to do something for me, not for me, for the integrity of the project. I need you to be my eyes and ears. No sabotage, no interference. I just want to know what they're doing. What simulations are they running? Are they seeing any anomalies? I need you to be a scientist, observe and report." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Then they don't deserve this plane, Russ, or you." "Yeah, I can do that. Consider me your man on the inside." When I hung up, Lena was looking at me, her head tilted. "What's the plan?" "I'm going to let them fly," I said, closing the logbook with a soft, definitive thud. "And I'm going to let them be brilliant. I'm going to let them show their investors just how dynamic they can be." I looked at the logbook, my silent partner in all of this. It wasn't a weapon of revenge, it was a life raft, and I was about to watch, from the shore, as Chloe and her team arrogantly chose to swim into a hurricane, having just thrown their only life raft overboard because they thought it weighed them down. The decision to remain silent was a heavy one, but it wasn't made in a vacuum of anger. It was a calculated choice, born from a lifetime of risk assessment. In my world, you don't second-guess the pilot in command unless you have overwhelming, irrefutable data. Chloe had made herself the pilot in command of the entire program. She had not only ignored my counsel, she had declared it invalid and removed me from the equation. To go back now, hat in hand, with a theory based on a single 3-second event from my personal logbook would be professional suicide. She would frame it as the sour grapes of a disgruntled old-timer trying to sabotage his replacement. She would bury me in HR complaints and non-disclosure agreement violations. No, my silence was not passive, it was strategic. It was the quiet, deliberate setting of a chess piece. The first move was a phone call, not to anyone at Aerodyne, but to a man named Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a semi-retired lawyer, a bulldog who'd spent 40 years specializing in aviation law, contracts, and corporate liability. We'd met years ago during a contract negotiation with a difficult engine supplier. He was sharp, cynical, and had a deep appreciation for the catastrophic cost of cutting corners. I found him on his boat, the Legal Eagle, enjoying a well-deserved retirement. I laid out the entire situation for him, from Chloe's arrival to the grounding to the contents of my logbook. I didn't frame it as a revenge plot. I framed it as a liability question. "Marcus, what is my legal and ethical obligation here?" I could hear the seabirds in the background as he let out a long, slow whistle. "Well, Russell, you've stepped in it, haven't you? or rather they pushed you into it. Let's break this down. Legally, that logbook is your personal property. You maintained it for your own process, your own professional development. It's not an official company document unless your contract specifically states all work product, including personal notes, is company property. Does it? I don't think so, I said. It's a standard engineering contract, focused on intellectual property developed for the company. This was a log of my experience in their property, not a new invention. Good, he grunted. That's a strong position. Ethically, it's murkier. A good man would want to prevent a disaster. But here's the rub. You tried to. You advised caution. You told your superior, the designated program director, that you weren't ready for a public demonstration due to unresolved anomalies. She didn't just disagree, she removed you and your authority. She, as an officer of the corporation, formally and explicitly assumed that risk. If you go to her now, she'll dismiss it. If you go to the board, she'll paint you as a saboteur. You're in a no-win situation if you speak up. So what do? I asked, the weight of it pressing down on me. You do nothing, Marcus said, his voice firm. You document everything. You write down the date and time of your conversation with me. You sit back, and you wait. Your hands are clean, Russell. You were a professional. You gave your best advice. It was rejected. The chain of command is a powerful thing, but it's also a chain of liability. She's the last link on that chain, not you. He paused. And for God's sake, don't give that logbook to anyone. Not until I tell you to. That book isn't just your leverage, it's your shield. It proves you were not negligent. On the contrary, it proves you were the only one paying attention. Hanging up with Marcus, I felt a strange sense of calm. He had given my instincts a legal framework. This wasn't malice, it was self-preservation. I had a reputation, a lifetime of impeccable service to protect. Chloe was threatening to burn it all down with her recklessness, and I wouldn't be the kindling for her fire. My secret plan wasn't a complex web of deceit. It was devastatingly simple. It was to let Chloe be Chloe. Her arrogance was the active ingredient. My role was to simply provide the stage and let her perform. The next few days were a masterclass in corporate hubris, narrated to me in hushed, anxious phone calls from Ben. My ally network was small but potent. It consisted of Ben, the brilliant young engineer, and Sal, my old ground crew chief. Sal was a man of few words, but his loyalty was absolute. He'd been with me for 20 years. He saw Jax, the new pilot, treating the Etherian like a rental car, and it offended him on a spiritual level. Ben's reports from the inside were chilling. They're in the simulator, he told me one evening. Jax is flying the demo profile over and over, but he's not learning the plane. He's just trying to get the fastest time. He's treating it like a video game. Is he seeing the glitch? I asked, my heart rate kicking up a notch. That's the crazy part, Ben said, his voice a mix of awe and terror. The sim is flagging it. Every time he hits that 45 cut Mach 1.2 window, the system logs a momentary flight control anomaly. It's a cascade failure in the simulation's code, exactly like you predicted. The virtual plane snaps into a roll. What's Jax's reaction? He's laughing about it. He calls it a sim bug. He told the lead programmer to patch the damn game so he can fly a clean run. He thinks the simulation is flawed, not the aircraft's design. And Chloe, she's backing him up. She held a meeting this morning and told the sim team to disregard the phantom errors and focus on the presentation graphics for the demo. She said, the simulation is a tool for marketing, not a crystal ball. She actually said that, Russ. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. This was a level of willful ignorance that bordered on the pathological. They had data. They had a simulation, a multi-million-dollar piece of hardware designed to be a perfect digital twin of the aircraft, screaming a warning at them, and they were putting their fingers in their ears and telling it to be quiet. They weren't just ignoring my experience. They were ignoring their own instruments. Competence isn't cheap until you lose it, and they were throwing it away with both hands. My foresight, the thing Chloe had punished me for, was the very thing that made me so certain of the outcome. I knew the glitch was real because I had felt it in my bones, but my secret weapon wasn't just a feeling. It was the meticulous documentation of that feeling. The logbook transformed a subjective experience into objective, prosecutable evidence. It contained my hypothesis about the resonance cascade, a theory far too complex for a hotshot like Jax to conceive of, and far too nuanced for a manager like Chloe to ever appreciate. She looked at the Etherean and saw a product. I looked at it and saw a complex, interconnected system, a living thing with hidden vulnerabilities. Sal's intel was more tactical, more grounded. He called me from a burner phone he'd bought. "Boss," he said, his voice a low grumble. "The new pilot, he doesn't do a proper pre-flight. He walks around the plane, kicks a tire, and signs the book. He doesn't talk to the crew, he doesn't look. He just assumes it's ready for him. You used to spend an hour out here, an hour. You touched every inspection panel. You talked to every one of us." "He's overconfident, Sal," I said. "He's gonna get himself killed," Sal stated flatly. "And he's gonna take your bird with him." Chloe had them paint a new logo on the tail, a big flashy Ethereans, in chrome script. It looks cheap, like something you'd see on a speedboat. They weren't just flying the plane, they were desecrating it. They were stripping it of its soul, its history, its painstaking development, and turning it into a prop for a dog and pony show. My quiet life at home took on a surreal quality. During the day, I worked in my garden, repaired a leaky faucet, and helped Lena grade papers. I was the image of a man settling into an early retirement. But at night, I was a spy master, a strategist, gathering intelligence from my two-man network, updating the timeline of events in a separate new notebook. I was building a case. I didn't know who the jury would be yet, the board, the FAA, or the court of public opinion, but I knew there would be a trial. The day before the demonstration, Ben called me in a panic. "Russ, they did it. The Simtex followed Chloe's orders. They patched the simulation. They wrote a piece of code that specifically ignores the flight control anomaly in that one window of the flight envelope. They just programmed the problem out of existence in the virtual world." Jax flew a perfect run this morning. He's as confident as ever. Chloe is ecstatic. They're going to fly tomorrow, and they have no idea. They literally deleted the warning. I felt a cold dread, mixed with a grim sense of vindication. It was the final nail in their coffin, and they had hammered it in themselves. They had achieved the pinnacle of corporate delusion. When reality doesn't match the PowerPoint presentation, you don't change the plan, you change reality, or in this case the simulation of it. That evening, Lena found me staring out the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and red, the colors of a fire. "Are you sure about this, Russ?" she asked quietly. "If something goes wrong, people could get hurt." I turned to her. "The glitch doesn't cause an explosion. It's a loss of control. It's violent, terrifying, but survivable, especially with the high-altitude ejection system. Jax is a good pilot, physically. He has the reflexes to recover, probably, but he won't know what happened, and the plane will be damaged. The stress on the airframe from a snap roll at that speed will be immense. It will ground the project for years. It will destroy Chloe's credibility and the investors' confidence. And most importantly," I said, tapping my temple, "it will prove that the ghost is real. It will prove that my cautions was just another word for right. My plan wasn't to destroy the plane, it was to reveal the truth. And the only way to do that was to let the truth speak for itself, in the language the Etherean knew best, the unforgiving physics of high-speed flight." The day of the demonstration arrived, a perfect, cloudless Tuesday, the kind of day pilots dream of. I didn't go to the airfield. I couldn't bear to see the circus, to watch them parade my beautiful wounded bird in front of a crowd of moneymen who thought they owned the sky. My silent takeover was to be conducted from the quiet of my own living room. I had the company's official live stream playing on my laptop. It was a slick production, full of swooshing graphics and a soaring orchestral score. They showed sweeping shots of the investor pavilion,
a collection of expensive suits and polite applause. Chloe was on the podium, radiating confidence. She looked directly into the camera, her smile polished to a high sheen. "What we are about to witness," she announced, her voice resonating with manufactured passion, "is not just a flight. It is the dawn of a new era, an era of disruptive innovation, powered by bold vision and aggressive execution. The Ethereum is more than an aircraft. It is a statement that the future belongs to the bold." My stomach turned. She was using the language of tech startups to describe a machine that operated on the laws of thermodynamics and fluid dynamics, laws that do not care about buzzwords. The camera cut to Jax, walking towards the Ethereum. He was in a brand new flight suit, his helmet tucked under his arm. He gave a thumbs up to the camera and a dazzling movie star smile. He looked like an actor playing a pilot, and in a way that's exactly what he was. Sal's words echoed in my head. He doesn't look. He just assumes it's ready for him. I watched him climb into the cockpit. My cockpit. I knew every switch in that space by touch, the exact pressure needed for every button, the familiar hum of the avionics coming to life. To him it was just an interface. He didn't have the history. He didn't have the connection. My first move in this silent war was made days ago. It was the decision to do nothing, to trust that my enemy's arrogance would be my greatest ally. Now all I had to do was watch the consequences unfold. The Ethereum's engine spooled up with that familiar soul-shaking roar. The live stream announcer, a man with a voice as smooth as honey, began his commentary. And there we have ignition. The twin GEX engines, each producing over 30,000 pounds of thrust, are running perfectly. What a beautiful sound. The plane taxied to the runway. It looked magnificent, a sleek, dark predator against the bright concrete. But I saw the cheap chrome logo on the tail that Sal had mentioned, and it felt like a scar. "Takeoff clearance has been granted," the announcer said. And here we go. The Ethereum leaped forward, accelerating with brutal, breathtaking speed. It lifted off the runway, climbing at a steep, aggressive angle that was designed to look impressive, but put unnecessary stress on the airframe. Jax was a showman. "What a spectacular vertical climb," the announcer gushed. "Jax is really showing us the raw power of this incredible machine." I watched the telemetry display on the live stream. Altitude climbing rapidly, 10,000 feet, 20,000, 30,000. The numbers were clean. The flight was by all appearances flawless. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What if I was wrong? What if the glitch had been a one-time event? What if my whole theory was just the bitter fantasy of a discarded veteran? Then my phone buzzed. A text from Ben. He's bypassing the standard step climb profile, going for the dynamic ascent straight to 45K. Chloe is beaming in the control room. Of course he was. He was following the script of arrogance. On the screen, the Ethereum was a silver speck against the deep blue of the upper atmosphere. The announcer's voice was filled with reverence. "Jax has now leveled off at 45,000 feet, a perfect transition. He's preparing for the centerpiece of our demonstration, the supersonic pass. We're about to see the Ethereum break the sound barrier and push on to Mach 1.2. This was it, the moment of truth. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. My hands were cold. The telemetry on the screen showed the airspeed indicator ticking up. Mach 0.9. Mach 0.95. A small digital puff on the screen indicated the sonic boom, inaudible from this altitude. Mach 1.0. Mach 1.1. The plane was a steady, perfect line on the tracking display. The camera zoomed in, the long-range lens capturing its graceful, deadly shape. Mach 1.15, 1.18, 1.19, and then it happened. It was almost too fast to see. For a split second, the Ethereum vanished from the camera's view. Not a camera shake. The plane itself. It violently snapped to the right, a brutal, uncommanded roll, disappearing from the frame. The live stream operator, caught by surprise, frantically tried to find it again. The announcer's smooth voice faltered. And there Jax is showing us some of the extreme agility of the Ethereum's fly-by-wire system, a very aggressive demonstration of its maneuverability. He was lying. I knew it. Anyone with a modicum of flight knowledge knew it. That wasn't a maneuver. That was a crisis. The camera found the plane again. It was wobbling, porpoising through the air like a wounded fish. It was no longer the graceful predator. It was a machine fighting for its life. Jax was wrestling with it, his overcorrections visible even from miles away. He was a good stick and rudder pilot. I had to give him that. He was fighting, and he was slowly, painfully, regaining control. Then the live stream cut. Just like that. Black screen. Then, a pre-recorded graphic of the Aerodyne Innovations logo, with the same soaring orchestral music from the beginning, now sounding hollow and mocking. The silence in my living room was deafening. I stared at the blank screen, my breath held tight in my chest. It had happened. The ghost was real, and it had just made its public debut. My phone began to ring. The screen showed Ben's name. I took a deep breath and answered. The sound that came through the phone was chaos, shouting in the background, alarms faintly beeping. Ben's voice was breathless, high-pitched with a mixture of terror and vindication. It happened, Russ. It happened exactly like you said. A full-on departure from controlled flight. He almost lost it. He's descending now, declaring an emergency. The control room is a madhouse. Chloe is. She's just standing there. Her face is as white as a sheet. Is he okay? Is the plane stable? I asked, my own voice sounding distant to my ears. He's stable, for now. He's fighting it all the way down. But the telemetry. Oh God. The telemetry is a nightmare. The stress sensors on the wing roots are off the charts. The airframe is compromised, Russ. He might get it on the ground, but that bird will never fly again without being completely rebuilt. I closed my eyes, a wave of grim satisfaction washing over me. It was a clean kill, not a fatal one, but a decisive one. Ben, I said calmly, what are you going to do? There was a pause, and the background noise seemed to quiet for a moment, as if he'd stepped into a quieter room. I'm quitting, he said, his voice now firm, resolute. I just watched our director nearly kill a pilot and destroy a billion-dollar asset because she refused to listen to an engineer. I can't work here anymore. I'm typing my resignation right now. He took a shaky breath, and I'm not the only one. Mike from avionics and Sarah from the flight control team. They're right behind me. We're done.
The exodus had begun, not with a bang, but with the quiet, determined clicking of keyboards writing resignation letters. It wasn't something I had asked for or orchestrated. It was a natural consequence of failed leadership. You can't treat talent like a disposable commodity. Sooner or later, the talent gets up and walks away. Competence isn't a line item on a budget, it's the entire foundation of the enterprise. And Chloe had just dynamited her own foundation. I was about to respond when the call-waiting beep sounded in my ear. I glanced at the screen. The name displayed sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Chloe, the power shift was palpable, a tangible thing I could feel through the phone line. The frantic energy from Ben's call was replaced by the dead, cold weight of Chloe's name on my screen. This was the moment. The turning point where the balance of the entire equation would be decided. I let it ring a second time. A small, deliberate act of control. Then I clicked over. Russell, I said, my voice as calm and level as a placid lake. The voice that came back was not the one I remembered from her office. The cool, condescending superiority was gone, completely stripped away. What was left was raw, high-frequency panic, stretched thin over a brittle frame of authority. Russell, what happened? What was that? There was no preamble. No greeting, just a raw, accusatory demand. I remained silent, letting her question hang in the air, forcing her to confront the void she had created. The live stream is down. The investors they're leaving, she stammered, the words tumbling over each other. The press is calling. Jax is on the ground. He's safe, but he's shaken. He said the plane it tried to kill him. He said the controls just died. What did you know, Russell? What did you not tell us? She was already building her narrative, her escape route. She was going to pin this on me, the disgruntled employee who withheld critical information. But she didn't know about my logbook. She didn't know about my conversation with Marcus Thorne. She was fighting a war, but she had no idea where the battlefield was. I let the silence stretch for another few seconds, a calculated pause that I knew would feel like an eternity to her. "Chloe," I said, my tone still maddeningly calm. I was grounded. "You told me my approach was too cautious. You placed your faith in a new team with a more aggressive philosophy. It seems you got the aggressive flight you were looking for." I could hear her sharp intake of breath. The quiet, factual statement was more damning than any scream could have been. "This is not the time for games, Russell," she hissed, a flicker of her old fire returning, but it was weak, fueled by desperation. "This company's future is on the line. I need to know what you know. Now, my knowledge, my experience, my caution, those were assets of my employment," I stated, each word a carefully placed stone. "Assets which you terminated. My professional observations are now my own." I was instructed to hand over all official company materials. I did so. "The anomalies," she almost shrieked. "You mentioned anomalies. In our meeting, you knew something. You have to tell me." This was the crux of it. The desperate counter-manipulation, the plea, the demand, the threat, all rolled into one. She was trying to shift the liability, to create a record of her asking and me refusing, painting me as the villain. "Chloe," I said, and now my voice took on a sharp, cold edge. "Let me be very clear. I observed a single, unverified and non-replicable event. As per standard flight test protocol, which you may not be familiar with, such an event requires a careful, methodical process of data collection to isolate and confirm before it is entered into the official program record as a confirmed bug. To do otherwise is professionally irresponsible. You grounded me before that process could be completed. You, and you alone, made the decision to proceed with a public demonstration against my verbal recommendation. You assumed the risk. It is now your risk to manage." There was a stunned silence on the other end. She had no answer for that. It was the truth, delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "I can help you, Russell," she tried, her voice shifting, becoming sickeningly conciliatory. "This can all be fixed. We can put out a joint statement. Blame it on a subcontractor. Your job, Russell. I can give you your job back. We need you. Hell, I'll make you vice president of flight operations. A raise. Whatever you want. Just help me." It was the classic move of the desperate, the offer of everything when they have nothing left to give. The power had completely shifted. She wasn't my boss anymore. She was a supplicant, and she was asking me to help her lie, to help her cover up the catastrophic failure born of her own hubris. I almost laughed. The vindication was so pure, so complete, it was almost overwhelming, but I held it in. A calm, quiet victory was always more devastating. "It's too late for that, Chloe," I said softly. "My caution, as you called it, is not for sale. It certainly isn't for sale to a company that doesn't value it." I paused, letting the final blow land. "I will be contacting the National Transportation Safety Board and the FAA in the morning. As a licensed pilot, I believe I have a professional and ethical obligation to share my personal flight logs with them, now that a public incident has occurred involving the aircraft in question. I think they will find my notes on the intermittent fly-by-wire glitch at 45,000 feet and Mach 1.2 to be of particular interest. My lawyer will be present." The sound that came from her end of the line was a small, choked gasp. Checkmate. I hadn't threatened her. I hadn't blackmailed her. I had simply informed her that I was going to follow federal aviation protocol. I was going to be a good, responsible pilot, and in doing so I was going to hand the regulators the exact evidence they needed to crucify her and the company. "You can't," she whispered. "I can," I replied, "and I will. Goodbye, Chloe." I ended the call. I sat back in my chair, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. The house was silent again. The panic, the chaos, the desperate pleading, it was all gone. All that was left was the quiet aftermath of a battle that had been won before it even began. The exodus of talent that Ben had described was just the first tremor. The earthquake was the official investigation to come. I had not only survived, I had become the architect of a new reality. A reality where my expertise was no longer just an opinion, but the undeniable, unassailable truth. The company I had given my life to was in ruins, not because of me, but because it had forgotten the most fundamental rule of all. You don't bet against the man who has actually flown the plane. The days following the call with Chloe were a blur of controlled, decisive action. The vindication I felt was not a hot, fiery emotion, but a cool, deep satisfaction, like the feeling of a perfectly executed landing in a heavy crosswind. It was the quiet hum of a system returning to equilibrium. My conversation with Marcus Thorne, my lawyer, was brief and to the point. He was ecstatic. "It's perfect, Russell. It's beautiful," he'd said, chuckling. "You didn't threaten, you didn't demand. You simply stated your intent to comply with federal regulations. She has no legal recourse. She's trapped in a box of her own making." The next morning, as promised, Marcus and I met with representatives from the FAA and the NTS. I brought my logbook, not a copy, the original. I sat in a sterile government conference room, the air thick with the serious, quiet intensity of federal investigators. I opened the book to the page detailing Flight XF-11728. I walked them through my notes, my theory on the resonance cascade, my hand-drawn graphs. I didn't editorialize. I didn't mention Chloe by name unless asked. I simply presented the data, the raw material of my experience. The lead investigator, a stern-faced man with pilot's eyes, read the entry 3 times. He looked up at me, then at my logbook, then back at me. He didn't smile, but I saw a flicker of something in his expression: respect. The respect of one professional recognizing the work of another. "Mr. Miller," he said, "your personal logs are some of the most thorough I've ever seen. This is significant." When we left the meeting, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying for 27 years. It was the weight of constantly having to justify my own competence. The fallout for Aerodyne Innovations was swift and brutal. The NTSB grounded the entire Ethereum program indefinitely. Their stock, which had been artificially inflated in anticipation of the demo, cratered. It lost 80% of its value in a single week. The board of investors, the same ones who had prized Chloe's aggressive style, turned on her with savage speed. She was fired, not allowed to resign, but publicly terminated for cause. A brutal and humiliating end to her brief, disastrous reign. Jax, the hotshot pilot, quietly disappeared from the industry, his reputation shredded. He was a good pilot, but he would forever be known as the man who let his ego override a multi-million-dollar simulations warning. The real victory, however, wasn't happening in boardrooms or on stock tickers. It was happening in a small leased office space 20 miles away from the Aerodyne campus. Ben Carter, along with the 2 other engineers who had quit, Mike and Sarah, had approached me the day after the incident. "We want to work with you, Russ," Ben had said, his eyes shining with purpose. "Not for you, with you. We want to build something, a company that puts engineering and safety first, a place that respects experience." And so we did. We pooled our resources, took out a small business loan, and founded a new aerospace consulting firm. We specialized in flight testing, safety analysis, and avionics integration. We called it Vance Dynamics, in honor of Arthur Vance, the old CEO who had understood that the soul of a company is its people, not its marketing department. Our first client came calling before the paint was even dry on our office door. It was Aerodyne's biggest competitor, a major defense contractor who had been trying to poach me for years. Their CEO called me personally. "Russell," he said, "I saw what happened. I've been saying for years that Aerodyne was valuing the wrong things. Your reputation is sterling. I have a new project,
And I don't just want your advice. I want your team to run the entire flight test program. You write the budget. You set the schedule. You have full autonomy. It was everything I had ever wanted. Not just a job, but respect. Not just a salary, but trust. 6 months later, I was standing in our new bustling office. Ben was whiteboarding a complex flight control algorithm with Sarah, their debate lively and brilliant. Mike was on the phone, landing a new contract. Through the window, I could see the tarmac of the small airfield we now operated from. Parked on it was our first project, a sleek new drone prototype for our first client. Our new workplace reality was one of quiet competence. There were no buzzwords, no pointless meetings, just hard work, mutual respect, and a shared passion for the unforgiving beauty of flight. The news about Aerodyne came in trickles. They were forced to sell off assets to stay afloat. The Etherian, my beautiful wounded bird, was eventually crated up and sold to a government research agency for pennies on the dollar, a museum piece before it ever had a chance to live. The company was a hollow shell, a monument to the high cost of cheap leadership. The final confrontation, if you could call it that, was a single email. It arrived late one night, from Chloe's personal account. It was short. You were right. I hope you're happy. I thought about it for a long time. Was I happy? Happy wasn't the right word. The word was balanced. The scales which had been so unjustly tipped had finally been righted. Arrogance had been met with consequence. Competence had been rewarded with opportunity. I typed back a single word reply, cautious. Then I deleted the email exchange and turned back to my work. The past was the past. The future was waiting on the runway. My new office isn't at 50,000 feet anymore. It's here, on the ground, but I feel like I can see more clearly than ever. I look out at the team we've built. Ben, Sarah, Mike, and a dozen other brilliant minds who value substance over style. We're not just a company. We're a sanctuary for professionals who were tired of being told their experience was a liability. Vance Dynamics is thriving, a testament to a simple, enduring truth. The foundation of any great endeavor isn't money or marketing. It's the quiet, unshakable competence of the people who do the work. What happened at Aerodyne wasn't really about me. It was about a clash of two opposing philosophies. One believes that expertise can be bought and sold like a commodity, that legacy knowledge is an anchor holding back progress. The other believes that experience is earned, minute by painstaking minute, in the crucible of reality. It believes that caution is not fear, but the wisdom to respect the forces you cannot control. Chloe and her board believed they could cheat gravity with a good PowerPoint deck and a confident smile. They were wrong. You can't fake competence, and you can't fake experience. Sooner or later the bill always comes due. They tried to erase me, to write me out of my own story, but they forgot that the person who builds the house knows where all the load-bearing walls are. They thought I was just a part of the machine they could easily replace. What they failed to understand is that some people are the machine. So I'm sharing this story for a reason. For every one of you out there who has been overlooked, underestimated, or told you were too cautious. For every person who has poured their life into a craft, only to be pushed aside by someone with a fancier title and a shallower understanding. Your experience is not a bug. It's the core operating system. Your knowledge is your value. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. The world is full of Chloes, people who mistake confidence for competence. Let them have their moment. Let them give their speeches and make their bold pronouncements. In the end, reality is the ultimate arbiter, and reality always respects the person who did the homework. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that sting of being undervalued, leave a comment below. I do read them all. Your stories matter. And if you want to hear more about what happens when arrogance goes up against quiet competence, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening.